New overnight, the Trump administration says Vice President J.D. Vance will not be traveling to Switzerland after all. The White House and the Swiss Foreign Ministry confirming discussions between the U.S., Iran, Qatar and Pakistan have been postponed. A White House official telling Fox News, quote, the plans for the upcoming technical talks have not been finalized, and the U.S. delegation has been prepared to depart at the first available opportunity. The VP also said that the 60-day window for nuclear negotiations is now underway. Watch.
I would say the 60-day period officially started today. It was signed late, and it may have even been signed technically, because of the time shift. I think it's signed technically today, Iran time. So, yes, the deal started yesterday. We're going to start the 60-day clock today. First of all, we believe international waterways should be free of tolls, and that's been our position. And when you say it leaves it open, it doesn't really leave it open, except in the sense that, of course, the final negotiation is going to set the terms of what comes afterward. What we're going to do, of course, working with our allies in the region, is to ensure that that is reflected in the final deal. And if that's not reflected in the final deal, there's not going to be a final deal. And that we have all the cards. If the Iranians want the benefits of the bargain, they have to give us the things that are necessary to get those benefits.
President Trump defending the newly signed Memorandum of Understanding. Here he is signing it in Versailles last week. He spoke with Axios about it last night. Watch.
What have you learned about not just the exercise of power, but the limits on your power as a result of the conflict?
There are no limits.
No limits.
No, not. I haven't learned that lesson yet. I know there are, but, there are no limits. We defeated them totally militarily. Most powerful military in the world, by far. Who else could have done a blockade like that? I did a naval blockade where not one ship was able to get through.
And it certainly brought Iran to the table more than before. However, beginning a conflict, you had talked about you only wanted unconditional surrender.
Well, it really probably is unconditional surrender.
It is?
I think so.
Now, even before the U.S. canceled J.D. Vance's trip, Iran's supreme leader claimed that the deal was more of a, quote, tactical pause in another stage of a forever war. He also said that he was pressured into the U.S. MOU and he never actually approved it. Joining me now is Heritage Foundation Vice President of National Security, Victoria Coates. Victoria, thanks very much for weighing in here. In an official letter, Ayatollah Khomeini, the supreme leader, the son of the Ayatollah, he said that the negotiations are solely his responsibility and that he will be held accountable if the U.S. fails to deliver the promised $300 billion plus the $100 billion package, Victoria. What's your sense of this postponement of the Switzerland signing?
Well, good morning, Maria. Yeah, I mean, this is very interesting to finally have the new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, weighing in on this. And you're correct. He is trying to sort of pass the ball a little bit to President Mahmoud Pezeshkian, who is the one who actually signed the MOU with President Trump. But at the same time, look at what this new supreme leader is doing. He is agreeing to direct talks between his government in Iran and the people who killed his father and blew his legs off 3 months ago. So, I mean, he can say, oh, it's desperation on the part of the Americans. I don't think so. I think this is desperation on the part of the Iranians for all the reasons we've discussed. I think they have an internal economic situation they simply can't manage. And so they have to come to the table. When it happens, it may take a couple of days because this is going to be very complicated on their side as well. But I really agree with Vice President Vance. The leverage is on our side here.
What about the critics of this deal, Victoria? What's your sense of this deal? Do you think that the president will harden it in any way? Does it need to be hardened? How do you view this agreement currently in place? You've heard what the critics have said.
Oh, indeed. I mean, and all Americans should be deeply interested in this. This is our national security, Maria. So I think everyone should take a good, hard look at it. It's a memorandum of understanding. This isn't a treaty or something that's serious. MOUs don't tend to be particularly binding. So that's not really my concern. My concern is that we get to the president's bottom line, which is the Iranian nuclear program. And from my understanding from our nuclear people, we've set them back at least 20 years physically in their ability to enrich uranium. We've killed their senior nuclear scientists. And so if that's in place and we can get the so-called nuclear dust, the highly enriched uranium, out of Iran, I think that's going to be the difficult thing in these negotiations. But the president has said they've started to move on it. And so if we can get there, then we've achieved our objectives. And we will have done to them what we should have done to North Korea, for example, in 2002.
Now, this is the letter that I was referring to where Khomeini says he never approved the Memorandum of Understanding. So obviously he's at odds with the president of Iran, who is actually doing the deal. Is that what we should believe, that it's the president of Iran who wants a deal, but it's the religious clerics like Khomeini who are trying to throw a wrench in it?
Well, I think what we're seeing is a lot of internal political division in Iran, and it does speak to the degree of disarray the country is in writ large. But if you have this kind of public disagreement between the supreme leader, whatever condition he's in, and the president, it's very difficult to negotiate with them. I think both the president and the vice president have said that repeatedly, that it's hard to get somebody who can make a decision in that country. But at the same time, it also means, there are opportunities there to exploit these fissures and to try to bring on some more political change in Iran.
And where do you fit Israel into all of this? Because we've got new information this morning, the Israeli military reporting that 4 IDF soldiers were killed while fighting in southern Lebanon. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed not to withdraw from the current security zone in that country, despite multiple warnings from President Trump and the United States. VP J.D. Vance called out Israel yesterday, warning Netanyahu to, quote, not rock the boat. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I mean, this is very much a fight in the family. The relationship between the United States and Israel is extremely close, and our cooperation over the course of Operation Epic Fury was historic. And so, we actually are headed to Israel this weekend for the JNS conference. We'll be seeing all of our Israeli counterparts, getting their perspective on this. But I really don't see this as a major impediment to any particular agreement with Iran, because ultimately the goal of Israel is the same goal as the United States: prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. That's what's intolerable to both of us. And I think we'll get there together.
And do you have a confidence that the U.S. will be able to verify whether or not Iran is keeping its promises? I mean, the biggest promise is obviously opening up the Strait of Hormuz with no tolls, and the president is on that, watching that every day. But do you believe that we have a policing strategy in place to ensure they're not rebuilding their stable of ballistic missiles and rebuilding their ammunition for a nuclear weapon?
No, this is what's so important about what we've achieved over the last 4 months. We know we can watch them like hawks. We can go in and we can hit them where and when we want. They can do nothing about it. The military superiority of the United States is beyond question. And so that is the president's ultimate leverage. It's why it's important he went back in last week and hit them again quite hard. And so he can go in and do it again. And the folks who say he won't, well, he's already done it 3 times. So I think he's probably got that tool in the toolkit.
All right, Victoria, great to get your take on all of it. Thank you so much, Victoria Coates. Stay with us. We'll be right back.